Let's hear from heaven today by reading the scriptures in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 to 32. This is the first part I'm going to read is Matthew chapter 20, is verses 27 to 30. This is about adultery. I'm going to get right into it. You have heard it said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you, for it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you, for it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Okay, so Jesus he follows up the lesson that we learned last week about murder, and about how the act of murder is not the act of murder is not the sinful part. It's the thought. It's being angry with somebody for no cause. Those kinds of thoughts are sinful, are just as sinful as murder is. Sorry about that. I was trying to get that thought in there. So he's showing us in last week's lesson, he's showing us that it's not just the act that is going to condemn you, but it's the thought that's going to condemn you, all right? And now he moves on to adultery. Now, murder, we talked about this last week. In the eyes of humans, murder is arguably the strongest sin that any one person can commit against another person or another group of people, all right? We know that. That's how we react. But remember, there is no ranking of sin with God. He considers all sin evil and all sin worthy of judgment. But he values human life. So he tells us that we don't want to sin that way. That is a great sin, that we don't want to be that way. And that's what we must control. Then he goes on to tell us about adultery. Now, adultery is probably, I think, the lust. Let's put it this way. Lust from one person to another, from a man to a woman, or even a woman to a man. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't even matter if you're married. Even if you're single, if you lust after somebody else, that is the second strongest emotion behind hate. Those are the two strongest emotions in the human person, the human spirit. And God knows that. So he addresses these two right away. He says, these are the two I want to take care of right now, because I want you to understand that it's not just the act. Because the Pharisees, the scribes, and the religious leaders, they said, based on what God's law said, that the act of adultery is, in their time, the act of adultery was punishable by death. Okay, so that's how strong of a sin they regarded it. But what Jesus is saying is, listen, he goes, I want you to know something. Yeah, the act is sinful and it is punishable, but you know what? So is the thought. I want you to understand, and he's saying this to us, I want you to understand, it's not just acting that condemns you. It's thinking about it. It's considering to do it. And I don't say thinking about it like, okay, I thought about lusting after somebody. That's not the sin. It's the thinking about it to act on it. It says, when you take that thought that much further, that is the sin. And Jesus is telling us, if you think about it, you are just as guilty as if you've already done it. So in this, he wants us to control our thoughts, and we must seek him out. We must seek the help of the Holy Spirit to help us control our thoughts and to stay away from sin. And that's what he's telling us when he says, if your right eye causes you to sin, or even your left eye, or if your hands cause you to sin, cut them off, because you know what? It'd be better if you go into heaven without those things than with those things, and your whole body perishes. But it's not a literal thing. Nobody's going to walk around and pluck out their eye. Nobody's going to walk around and cut off their hands. He's giving us hyperbole, if you will. He's telling us, this is how much I want you to consider sin. I want you to consider lustfully looking at somebody a sin so much that you'd be willing to cut your eye out so you don't have to do it ever again. That's how much he wants us to look at this as sin. Verses 31 to 32. Furthermore, it has been said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever divorces his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a woman who is divorced commits adultery. That's very self-explanatory. It's very simple to understand. God values marriage. And like I said, this is the second thing that he wants to clear up after murder. He values marriage. He values human life. He values marriage. He says back in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, he says, when he created Adam and Eve, when he created Eve and told Adam to take her as his wife, he said to her, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So when a husband and wife get married, they are one flesh. All right? They're not two different fleshes. They're one flesh. Okay? So God is telling us, Jesus is telling us that you're not allowed to cut that off. You can't. Except for sexual immorality and except for adultery. I will allow it. Because what happens, to kind of explain it to you, what happens is, all right, so a husband and wife come together. They consummate the marriage. They have become one flesh. All right? Let's say the husband strays and cheats on the wife, and he goes and consummates with another one, meaning he has sex with the other woman. Well, he's just been joined to that woman, because that's what, when a man and woman have sex together, that in the eyes of God is those two are married and have become one flesh. So Jesus is telling him, okay, fine, if you're going to do that, that's a sin, but I will allow you to get divorced because I don't want the other one to be guilty of committing a sin of adultery because you didn't give that divorce. Now, here's the thing about this. Just because it's allowed doesn't mean we have to do it. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. So even though a marriage has had that element of destruction or damage to it as adultery or sexual immorality, whatever you want to call it, it could still be repaired. God can still repair it. And it's as long as the two people involved really want it repaired. There's nothing to stop God from doing that. There's nothing to stop God from saying, okay, you know what? You don't have to get a divorce. It's perfectly good. All right. So anyway, our doxology for this week is how we're taking these two principles of respecting what God has created and keeping them together and keeping them safe. Is we're going to read this later on when we get to Matthew chapter 22. This is what Jesus said. He said to them, you shall, when they asked him, what is the greatest commandment? Because there was a debate going on. And Jesus said, you shall love you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. That is the first and greatest commandment. And the second one is just like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself, meaning you should treat your neighbor as you would treat your own self. Then he goes on to say, on these two commandments are the law and the prophets, meaning the Old Testament, and meaning what God's law actually means. If you love the Lord your God with everything you have and treat others as you would treat yourself, you are fulfilling God's law. All right? Have yourself a great week.